Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you are new. My name is Ethereal, and I'm the host of the Chameleon System, and we are going to be continuing with Chapter 3 of Jack Has DID. Okay, so just a bit of backstory for this. Jameson Jackson still hasn't fronted, and Jack has said that Chase and Schneep are very protective of him, and they won't even tell him anything. And Jack is now in his inner world. He's just lost the front. Okay. Jack! Chase's voice sounded as he came into the living room. Been a while. It's so rare that we get to talk like this. Jack looked at him in surprise. Nice to see you too, Chase. I thought you fronted, to be honest. The American straightened his flap-brimmed hat and came to sit on the couch, shaking his head. Nah, I was close, but I'm here now. I figured you'd taken full consciousness again. I was pushed to the back. Jack sat down beside him with a frown. Well, Dr. Schneep, then, he concluded. Jack? The thick German accent startled them both. How have you been? I have missed you. As Dr. Schneepelstein entered the room, all three elders turned pale. Chase? Dr. Schneep said in some surprise, You are both here. This is impossible, Jack. So, Jameson Jackson has obviously fronted, and they are upset about it for whatever reason. I'm sure we'll figure out. Jack's eyes were fixed on the American, who was sitting there numbly. After a moment, he looked up at Dr. Schneep. He must have fronted. No, the doc said instantly. He shook his head. No. You must have, Chase repeated. No, the doctor looked quite incensed. So, I haven't read ahead, but obviously I feel like they're setting this up for JJ to be a trauma holder, which is why they don't want him to front, because they're very protective, and if he did front, it might be because of triggers, so they're all worried about him, because, as Chase said before, he thought Jack had retaken the front because he was pushed back so far, but potentially being pushed back so far was because of JJ fronting. Jack grabbed Chase's arms, forcing him to meet his gaze. Talk, he demanded. Chase was silent for several moments. When he finally spoke, he didn't look at Jack. JJ fronted. Jameson? Jack shook his head. You said he never fronts. He doesn't. Chase's voice was taut. He hasn't in years, and it's not safe for him to be. So, yeah, some altars don't front for literal years. Some altars are stuck in dormancy, or they're just stuck in general. They're locked altars or trapped altars. And again, trauma holders might not want to front because of any sort of triggers. The American side, we're protective. I know that, but he's a part of me. I need to know about him, please. He's a trauma holder. You're a trauma. He keeps it safe from you. Everything from when you were little that you don't remember because of him. Jack chewed his lips silently. I thought you were created first. I was. Well, I guess we were sort of created at the same time. Your trauma caused you to react in two different ways. Me and JJ, we're two different forms of protection. I'm hands-on. JJ works through amnesia. He has all of your traumatic memories. So sometimes trauma will be split up between different trauma holders, and sometimes it'll just be one holding all of the trauma. For DID and OSDD to form, it does have to be repeated trauma throughout the childhood, and it's understandable why they're so protective of him. So they're still talking about this, and Jack asked, what triggered him to front in the first place? So there are two different types of triggers, and I thought this was a good place to put that. There are negative triggers and positive triggers. A negative trigger is something that might remind you of any sort of trauma or something bad that happened to you, and a positive trigger might be a food or a movie or a song that you like, or it might be a color. It could be anything depending on what altar is being triggered. So another thing is Jack is finally fronting again, and Chase asks him what was he doing before JJ fronted, and he was trying to start a video of 5 Nights at Freddy's. So one of you must have started a level. JJ got scared of the game. He's not doing well at the moment. Shit, is he going to be alright? Schneep's checking on him. He should be, but I don't know. It sucks. He finally fronts and immediately has to pay for this. This is a thing. Schneepelstein as physical protector, and also just the one that's closer to JJ. They don't have a caretaker, so it makes sense for one of the altars to be checking with what was happening on the outside, while the other one is taking care of the other altar, in this situation, JJ's physical and mental well-being, because he got jump scared. Just generally, fronting can be very traumatic for some altars, especially if they're triggered out, so this was a good way to handle that. This is very well written. When he woke up, he was back in the inner world. Someone must have fronted in their sleep. It was happening more and more frequently lately. This is, again, another thing that happens. Alters can share dreams. You can have an alter front just to sleep, like one of our sleep protectors might, and then a different person can wake up in the body. That's something that happens on a general occasion with many types of systems. So this is something that was also mentioned in the story before. I don't know if I brought it up. I don't think I did. The Brit brought up the same hand and began to sign quickly. JJ, the doctor placed his hand on top of Jameson's. Slow down for him. So some alters can be mute or blind, or there's just alters can have disabilities that don't coexist with the body. We have an alter Madeline that's mute and an alter alien that is selectively mute. So this is another common thing, especially when going through trauma. A reason for it may be that they were always, that during that trauma they were always maybe being told to shut up, or if they were going through abuse, their abuser might have put headphones on so that they would block out noise, or put a blindfold on so they didn't know what they were doing to them to add more fear. At the end, he placed a hand on his chest. You? Is that your name? Jack asks, impressed. When Jameson nodded, Jack chuckled. I don't know any sign language, he admitted. So this is another thing, is that some alters will have different skills than the body does. They just have to, at some point or another, the body would learn it. So not the different skills than another alter can have, not the body. They would just have to learn it in the body. For example, if an alter fronted for 2 years and learned French, the host might not know French. If an alter knows piano, another might not. It just depends on who's fronting, when, and where. Okay, this one's just a funny one. Look, you wear a hat every time you front anyways. This is common for alters in general. Whether or not they have dysphoria in the body, it's very common for an alter to have something like a hat or a bracelet that they will wear because it makes them feel more with themselves and with their identity, especially if a male alter is fronting in a female body. They might wear a hat to pull their hair back so that they feel less dysphoric about the body. This one is actually a common thing for us, and I believe also our ex-partner system. As he picked up his fork, a stabbing pain shot through his eye. Fuck, he dropped the fork and reached up, rubbing it quickly. His entire body tensed and panicked, and he couldn't stop shaking. He wasn't sure if he was going to throw up, pass out, or go into shock. A bead of sweat trickled down his face. After a moment, the pain passed, leaving him with a dull ache that eventually faded as well. He couldn't help feeling worried, however. He had never experienced eye pain before. So, I have a feeling this is going to lead into Auntie. I'm sure we can all guess that. For us, personally, it's because Melanthia has her left eye gone. And so when she's closer to the front, I can actually sometimes feel like pain in my eye, or I'll get a lot of headaches behind just the left eye. And so when Melanthia fronts, she often feels more comfortable covering up her left eye. So yeah, we just related to that personally. That was really nice to read. Okay, so they're back at the psychiatrist's. And Jack and Chase are practicing speaking to each other without Jack speaking aloud. Okay. Jeffrey smiled. I'm glad. Trauma holders can often go a different direction, so it's good to see Jameson doing so well. Different direction? His eye twitched. He reached up and rubbed it absent-mindedly. Well, in some cases, the trauma holder turns their pain outward. They lash out at other alters, or even themselves. There's nothing. Jack could hardly hear him now. So, they're obviously talking about persecutors, and a persecutor, Auntie, happens to be near. Jack could hardly hear him now. His blood was rushing in his ears, roaring. He could hear a voice, faint at first, but slowly glowing louder in his head. Stop. He winced at the volume. Jack? Jeffrey's voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. A shrill laugh sounded in his head. He felt faint. His eyes were going heavy. He was sweating. Jack? So faint. Jeffrey was far, far away. The voice shouted through his head, "Stop." There was silence for a moment. Another laugh followed it, a laugh that sent shivers down Jack's spine. "I'm here." And that was the end of chapter 3. So, this is obviously a persecutor. Persecutors, they are a bit startling when you first find out about them. They are just people that are angry. They are alters that are scared. They have been hurt, and they are angry that they have to be in this body of someone that they potentially see as weaker than them, someone who couldn't fight their own battles. So they are upset at that person. Our persecutor protector, Melanthia, had a lot of the same feelings, and mainly this persecutor, from what I'm understanding from the text, was saying to stop talking about it because they didn't want to be found out, which is sometimes common. Alters can hide in a subconscious area, or they'll hide in areas of an inner world that the host can't reach. Okay. So we're on to chapter 4 now. Chapter 4. "What was that?" Jeffrey asked. "Are you okay?" Jack was slouched down in his chair. He sat up straight. "I'm fine," he whispered. "It doesn't seem that way. It was just a bit of infighting." Okay, so this is just fighting in the inner world. It's a pretty common term. Actually, I do want to say something that I think I forgot to say. Persecutors can be scary, but that does not mean that they are monsters. That does not mean that you should treat them that way. Treating them that way will not make them want to work with you. They're just people that have been hurt, and that they're lashing out. Sometimes they might not even be lashing out at other alters. They're just lashing out at themselves, and that in turn hurts other alters because of the fact that they share the same body. But persecutors are not evil. Okay, so Jack just switched out with Schneep, and he found JJ having a panic attack, which is why Schneep was panicking as he was being pulled to the front, because he was helping JJ through that. Again, it's very caretaker-like thing to do. Okay, now we've reached a point where the persecutor is antagonizing JJ, so Jack switched out, and Schneep isn't back, so it's possible that he was just somewhere in headspace, or they were stuck being Kokon and he couldn't fully step back. Your fault. The sudden voice made JJ jump, clutching the puppet close to his chest as he glanced around the room. The door slowly creaked open, a stream of light shining onto the Brit's face. For a moment, the threshold was empty, then a shrill laugh sounded throughout the room, and a dark figure glitched there. JJ's eyes went wide. "Jameson, it's your fault," it growled. He shook his head quickly. "It's all your fault." The figure glitched and reappeared right in front of him, his hand wrapping around JJ's throat. So, this is a hard one to do, obviously, because persecutors aren't evil, they aren't bad. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean they're the greatest people. Like, he's hurting another altar. It's just a hard line, because obviously we don't want anyone to be scared of anyone with the ID, but there are situations where altars, not necessarily persecutors, but just altars, you can have interjects of your abuser, you can have interjects of I'm not going to read it, but basically Auntie was there, and he choked JJ, and he told him he should unalive himself because he's caused everyone pain. So, and he cut Jameson's wrists. Yeah, I don't really know what to say about this. This is just, I understand why it might be a necessary part of the story. It's just kind of hard to get through. So we're just gonna move on. I think I said what I was supposed to say about it. Okay, so now they're in the inner world with Schneep, so we're not focusing on Jack right now. And he was trying to sleep, and it didn't really work, and he heard screaming, and he went to check on Jameson, and he heard the voice say, "Henrik, leaving so soon?" And there's a confrontation between JJ and the persecutor that is Auntie, and he's just lashing out at his system. Oh, that's the end of the chapter. So it's the next chapter. They're talking about going back to the therapist and finding this new altar, and they're kind of arguing, and Chase is saying, "All I care about is finding this guy, and when I do, you better believe he's gonna pay. He hurt our family, Jack, and when I find him, I'm gonna kill him." So that's not possible. You can't kill altars. Altars can go dormant. Altars can integrate and split, but you can't kill an altar. I don't know if he's just speaking of anger or if this actually is just some misinformation, but altars can't die. You can have dead altars, but they can't die. So Jack asked, he's having a confrontation with Auntie, and he asked why he's hurting us, and they're replying, "I only hurt two. I didn't mean to hurt the doctor. He was in my way." And Jack's asking, why did you hurt JJ? Why did you mean to hurt JJ? What did he ever do to you? And they said, his fault. Everything, all of the trauma, all of the pains. So this is what I talked about earlier about blaming a specific person. Normally, they would blame the host because they were the one in that situation originally, but he's blaming the trauma holder for whatever reason. And he was there for our abuse, Jack. I was there too. So he also has some trauma memories, clearly. So before, they thought that this was a new altar, but it's not, because he's been there since childhood. And Jack says Chase and JJ were there. Chase told me there was no one else he would have known. Again, this isn't necessarily true because altars can hide themselves even from primary protectors. I doubt they can hide themselves from gatekeepers, but there's no gatekeeper in this system, which is fine. Not every system has every role. Sometimes there's only one other altar in a system. So another thing of note is that after Auntie's confrontation with Schneep has just been gone. I'm assuming he's dormant, but they can't find him. And now he's saying, "The doctor thought he could save him, but I've always been here. Do you honestly think this is the first time I've visited your precious boy? This is between me and him. It's been far too long, and I no longer care about being noticed. You lost your doctor already. Would you like to be next?" So when he was having that confrontation with Schneep, he showed him some things that I didn't add or say aloud because I don't need to, but they were traumatic things, so it would make some form of sense for Schneep to go dormant. And again, the threatening is... And then Jake asks him, "You want to hurt JJ. Why? Do you honestly think he could have done anything to stop our abuse?" And Auntie replies, "He could have tried." "We were 5, Jack said, so clearly going to therapy he's gotten some knowledge of what happened. He might not know what happened, but he does know that he was a 5-year-old. We felt that pain. He felt it. He was born from it. Now he'll feel it for the rest of his life. So again, with the blaming of a certain alter. Are we still talking about JJ? Jack asked, or you? The glitching alter went still, and Jack could see him tremor slightly. So again, this is what I talked about with persecutors that are just hurt, and they're using their hurt to hurt others. Auntie had done awful things, but he was hurting, and while Jack wasn't sure he wanted to trust Auntie completely yet, he didn't want to run the risk of Chase harming him, or worse, Auntie harming Chase. So alters can't die, but yeah, it's hard for a persecutor to come out of their negative thinking in a way that isn't, like, they can't just be completely forgiven. I know with Melanthia, like, it took a bit of trust gaining because of stuff that she had done in the past, but it is possible and it is doable. This is a bit much, but again, it's for story purposes. This is a point I liked in the story. In the meantime, he researched persecutors as much as he could. He still wasn't ready to go back to Dr. Jeffrey yet, but he made sure to fact-check articles and get as much reputable information as he could. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that Auntie wasn't inherently evil. Persecutors weren't inherently evil. They had been through so much pain, remembering much of the abuse. Since it was the only thing they knew, the only life they knew, they continued the process long after the source of the abuse was gone. They turned the pain on themselves or other alters they believed to be at fault for what they'd endured. Suddenly, everything Jack had experienced with Auntie was making sense. Most of the sources he'd read, however, had pointed out that the cycles didn't have to last forever. Much the same as when Jack had first been diagnosed, the key to helping persecutors was communication. This is completely true. They had to be shown that the pain didn't have to continue, and with time and patience, they could heal and eventually become one of the system's fiercest protectors. So yeah, this is all true. That's why Melanthia is our persecutor protector. Dr. Schneep is back from possible dormancy, and Jack is in the inner world again. He headed to the bedroom to check on JJ. Hopefully he was doing all right. When he reached the threshold, he stopped dead, staring at the man sitting at the edge of JJ's bed. Dr. Schneepelstein looked up at him, breaking into a tired smile when he saw Jack. It has been a while, Jack. Ja? Okay. So, they're talking now about the persecutor, and Schneep asks if Chase knows, and they just kind of have this talk, and then Auntie shows up. He was glitching, head bowed, eyes watching the Irishman through low-hanging bangs, his arms hung limply at his sides, dripping with... So Schneep is like, that's him, and he moves protectively to the threshold of JJ's bedroom, and, then Auntie leaves. And Jack turns to Schneep and he says, he's in so much pain, you can see that, can't you? And Schneepelstein, it says, yes, he can. So we're actually at the 6th chapter, so I guess this was a two-parter. And now Jack and Schneep are having a talk about Auntie. And Schneep says, think of it as the fight-or-flight response, ja? JJ was damaged internally. His response was to run, to retreat into himself and hide. Auntie, on the other hand, responded with anger, with hate. He could not harm his abuser, so he turned his pain on himself. And this is a little bit of speculation that he thinks JJ could have done something more, like it was his fault, ja? So his wish for harm extends to him as well. Persecutors don't have to hurt forever, and they are making a plan to hopefully help Auntie and the rest of them all heal. So a lot of stuff is going on, and Jack is basically asking Auntie to have a talk with Jameson, as long as Jameson's okay with it, and he's just said he is, and Schneep is kind of upset about it. And he agrees to talk, basically, as long as he can supervise. So they're meeting, and I honestly don't know if this is a good or bad representation, but essentially, Jameson asks to see Auntie's arms, and then he shows him his arms, and he says that the scars that he had gotten from the fight had faded, and that made Auntie realize that they did the same coping mechanism that wasn't healthy, and it's not a good coping mechanism, but they kind of have an understanding about that they've both have suffered and they don't have to suffer more. So now it's been a few weeks and Schneep is fronting, and Jack heard a yell and he ran and he realized that Chase had finally figured out about Auntie, so they're all together, and Chase just has a weapon that he plans on using, even though you can't kill an alter again. And they're arguing, and then Chase says, I don't give a damn about your triggers, I don't give a damn about you, you hurt my family. This isn't a very healthy way of thinking, especially for a primary protector. And you shouldn't trigger an alter, especially, like, you shouldn't try to trigger your own system just because you don't like them. I understand this type of situation is very unique in that he was actively hurting another alter, but it's just a bit rough coming from a primary protector. And then Jack says this, I won't let you hurt him, he's changed, and even if he hadn't, we can't go around trying to destroy any alter we want. Communication, remember? So Jack diffuses the situation, and he's back at the psychiatrist, and he says, we had a persecutor, a bad one, we've never seen it before. And Jeffrey asks, did he hurt you? And Jack says no. He went after Schneep once, and JJ, I don't think he cleared his throat. He's done it to JJ several times. I see. Where's this persecutor now? Wandering the inner world? The Irishman rubbed his eye again. He's pretty close, actually. I think he might be Kokon. The psychiatrist looked concerned. Are you safe to talk about him? I don't want to put any of you in danger. Again, it's hard because you don't want to villainize a persecutor, but if a persecutor is going to front and then use unhealthy coping mechanisms like alcohol or other drugs, it's a hard situation. But Jack talked about having their communication and saying that he feels that he deserves a chance, and the psychiatrist says, not at all. That's the path I encourage all alters to take when faced with a persecutor. Like I said before, a persecutor can become one of the system's fiercest protectors. They just need to be given a second chance. And that is basically where it ends. So yeah, I do agree about what they say about persecutors at the end there. I was a little iffy on the descriptions of violence, but it is something that some systems have to deal with, but it doesn't mean that a system is dangerous. They're not going to go kill someone. Systems aren't murderers. And if you haven't been able to tell throughout this entire video, I've been very dissociated, so I'm going to stop it here. Bye, guys.